Hey, welcome to Real World Laravel, a series where I take you behind the scenes of my production applications to show you what I'm building, whether it's a feature or, in today's case, testing. Yes, the thing that you do all day, every day at your day job, but never do on your side projects because ain't nobody got time for that. I understand, that's me. But I have pushed one or two bugs to production in buckets, which is a problem, especially once users start paying for it. It's really unacceptable. It can happen. So I knew I needed some testing. I started messing around with some unit tests in Laravel, and it was okay. You can test like what kind of responses you're getting back, what data is available in your Inertia front end, since I build buckets with a Svelte front end using Inertia. And that was okay. It wasn't too bad. I got some validation, but what I really needed to do was end-to-end browser testing. Now, luckily, Laravel gives us an awesome library for doing this called Laravel Dusk. If we look at the Laravel homepage and we scroll down to the section with all the packages, here we go. We'll see Dusk here, automated browser testing. So you can click on that. It'll bring you to the documentation. I'm not going to run through any of the setup or anything. It's all right here. And it's pretty straightforward installation. It's just running a couple commands and you'll be up and running. Instead, I want to show you a little bit of the tests that I wrote for my Inertia front end, and then also show you a couple things that trip me up a little bit, and hopefully save you a little bit of time if you decide to write some Dust tests for your own app. If we jump into the code, I'll show you the first test I wrote called landing test, and it's kind of exactly what it sounds like. We just want to make sure that the landing page loads. One time I pushed a bug that I was basically referencing undefined in the JavaScript. So that meant that when you hit the landing page of my site, it would just be a blank screen with an error in your console. That's a problem. You can't be shipping that bug. So this is basically just a smoke test of the landing page, but it kind of shows you the simplest possible version of a Dusk test. So you basically just start any test with this browse, and then inside this callback is where you're going to actually be doing all of your testing. So we take the browser and we'll just visit the root, and then we can just say assert C, which just means somewhere on the page I can see this text. We have start small, sign up, and login. So if I show you what buckets looks like, and I think I'm logged in, so let me do an incognito. Buckets.test. So there you go. So we have start small on the screen, and we also want to see these login and sign up buttons. Okay, great. Just checking that it will render. Okay. For a more complicated test, if I go back and we look at buckets test, so this is a more legit test. You can see when I was in the airport and on the plane writing these tests, I just called it everything because I didn't really know how. Like, are there any best practices for splitting up these tests? Probably features or pages or whatever, but I really just wanted to test the flow and not worry too much about how to structure it because it's easy to just copy and paste this stuff to a different file later. So to start, I just had one giant test. Let's just run through and figure out how to use Dusk because I had never used it before, so this was a learning experience for me. So let's jump into it a little bit. I create a user, and then we just want to log in as that user. Dusk gives us this nice login as function. Then we just navigate to the buckets page, and we want to make sure we see both the user's name, so you can see how you can like reference this user object down here. I want to see the user's name, and I want to see create bucket. If we jump back over to buckets, and we're logged in, so you can see the create bucket button, and up in the top right, we see the user's name, which in this case is a fake name. So that works, so we can see that. Then as a quick example for some code organization, obviously this is just writing code. A test is just writing code. So I created this create bucket function so that I could reuse it. So I just pass in the browser and then the name of the bucket I want to create. And we can jump in there and see that not only will this create the bucket using the UI, so it's not doing anything direct to the database. It'll go through the UI, create the bucket, but it'll also do some validation to make sure that it passed as we expected. So we can see press create bucket. Okay, makes sense. Wait for an input with a name of name. Type into that input the name that we passed into this function. Give it a monthly budget. Press the save button. Then wait until the save button is gone. Technically, this is just saying wait until you don't see the word save anywhere on the screen, and I'll show you why I use that in a second. Then once the save button is gone, we'll continue with the test and we'll make sure we see the name of the bucket that we just added, as well as this $100, which will be the display amount. And then we, as a little extra bonus assertion, we say make sure you don't see 100.00, and that's because on the homepage of buckets, I don't show the sense if it's 00. So just a little extra validation. So to kind of put this stuff into context, we are clicking on this bucket, or this button. Then we give it a name. Hi, Mom. We give it a budget of 100. We press the save button. Now the save button is gone. So we test, or then we check to see that we can see Hi, Mom, the name of the bucket, and the $100. Great. That looks awesome. So that's how we can kind of reuse some functionality. So if we go back to where we were calling that here, so we create the bucket, then the next step is to edit the bucket. So if I go back to buckets, we can see you click on this menu. So remember, before we were clicking on create bucket, which is just text inside a button. So it will just find the button that has that text in it and press it for you. In this case, we have a symbol in the button. So obviously no text we can reference. So what do? So that's where we use this little @ syntax, which this is called a Dusk selector. And I'll open up the bucket card and show you what that looks like. So on any element, any HTML element, I'm putting it on a component in this case, but you can put it on any element. So you just say Dusk equals, and then you put whatever you want in there. So I said bucket card dropdown. So then here I'm going to say @ bucket card dropdown, and Dusk knows to go look for the element that has that Dusk selector on it. So there you go. Now we can click the button with the symbol. So we're going to press that button. Then I'm going to click the edit option inside of there. And if I go back to buckets, I'll show you. So we click here, we click edit. It'll bring this up. So then we're going to type in this field, change the name, and press the save button. Okay. So we go here, we click on that edit button, then we type bucket name as our new name, press save, and then we see this wait until missing text again. So let me walk you through this now that we're here. This was kind of one of the gotchas I ran into with Inertia, and it could just be with the modal library that I'm using. Like there's a lot going on, but just in case you run into this too, I want to explain. So one of the methods that Dusk gives us is press and wait for. So what this does is I could just say save. Okay, so it's going to press the save button, then it's going to wait until that save button is enabled. So it's basically assuming that, okay, if you have some button in your app that's firing off a network request, you're going to disable the button, fire off the request, and then it's going to stay disabled until you get a response back for that request. So that makes sense, pretty common behavior. So they give you this shorthand to just wait until the button gets re-enabled. The issue with my app is that, as an example, if we open this up, change it to bye mom, sorry mom. When I click save, it does get disabled as expected, but once the request is done, I'm going to be honest, I didn't know that my toasts do dark mode, so I need to update that. But anyway, once the network request comes back, I actually close the modal. So it just seemed like Dusk was not picking up on, it's not like it saw it get enabled again and then the modal closes. Maybe it's order of operations there. I'm not sure. But as a workaround, instead of actually waiting for that text or the button to be re-enabled using this little helper press and wait for, I just say wait until missing text, save. And the reason that works is if we go back and look at this again, the only place we see save is this button. So when that button disappears, there's nowhere on the page now that says save. So that's another way to just say, pause the test for a second. I need to wait for this network request to come back. So same idea, another way to do it. Okay, and then we just have a quick assertion of bucket name, which is of course the new name that we just put up here. So great. So there's a couple examples of like simple ways to test some of your CUJs. And now I don't want to go through this whole test just line by line. So instead I'm going to focus on a couple of the other little gotchas that I had while testing Inertia. So the next one is wait for location. So in this test, I am clicking the dropdown again, but then I click this view transactions button. So I'll show you. We say view transactions, and it actually navigates us over to the transactions route. So I wanted to tests that this is working and that we see the transactions as expected. So we click the bucket card, then we click the transactions button, then this wait for location. So anytime you're waiting for navigation, it seemed like this was the best way to do it. There are a couple other ways, like I tried like wait for reload or wait for refresh. I thought maybe those would hook into the inertia events where it's making a request and then replacing the data. I didn't know if is that a reload? Is that a refresh? I'm guessing a refresh is probably an actual browser refresh. So anyway, wait for location seemed to work really well. So if you're using inertia and you are navigating to another route and you need to, wait until that route is ready, wait for location is the way to go. Another gotcha. Okay, so let's go to, which test was it? It was this one, that search filters the results. Okay, let me show you what we're working with here. So you have the context. Let's add a transaction. Hey there, misspelled, not gonna worry about it. Okay. So now when we look at the transaction screen, we can see, hey there. And this search box does exactly what you would expect it to do. If I search for hey, it's still there. If I search for blah, we get no transactions found. Okay, so this is what I wanted to test. Make sure that the search box is working. How can we do that? Well, it's very easy. You can just use type. So I'll say type into the input with a name of search, blah. Then we want to make sure that we see no transactions found. Okay, and we did. Then I wanted to clear the input box and make sure that the transaction came back. Makes sense. Well, Dusk gives us this really nice method called clear. So I could just say clear search and then get rid of all this stuff and just do my validation. So why didn't I do that? Unfortunately, I'm using Svelte, and with Svelte, you don't actually listen to the onChange event for an input. You just bind a variable to the value of that input. It's just it's a little magic of Svelte. And it seemed like when I ran that clear method, the bound variable was not getting updated. So I'm not sure why, but instead I did this sort of hacky, but at the same time gets the job done approach. So I said, get me the element that's an input with the name of search and click on it. Okay. So that's basically just focusing it. So we go up here. Okay, we're in there. Then you can say browser with keyboard. Take the keyboard and we're just going to type backspace 4 times. So again, kind of funky, but that's also what a user would do. So they would come here and do blah, 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 blah. Okay, there we go. And our hey there is back. So then we can actually assert and make sure that our transaction is visible again, which as I'm looking at it, I'm realizing I'm not doing. I'll add that. Okay. Last thing, which isn't technically like a Dusk or Inertia thing, but it's just a tip. Watch out for this. I was banging my head against the wall for a little bit trying to figure this one out. So I mentioned, okay, here's a good example actually. So when we delete a transaction, all we do is we press the delete button, press delete in the modal, and then we wait until this is permanent is gone, is missing, which that seems kind of weird. I just told you about how we can use this pattern where I could have put delete here. Like, okay, once the delete button is gone from the screen, we're good, right? Let's go look at what it looks like. If I click the trash can, we see our delete button. Okay, great. But look at our toast. Deleted. So we say deleted in the toast. So if we are waiting for the word delete to be gone, it'll take an extra 5 seconds, and the default amount of time that this helper waits is 5 seconds. So basically my test was erroring here because delete was still hanging on the screen up in the toast. So that's where I got this is permanent from, is if I go add a transaction, 10, blah, and we go back to here, I have this is permanent and can be undone. So that's text that's only visible in the modal. So I just picked that. It's basically a way to say this modal is no longer visible. And that happens after the request comes back. So it's kind of like, go do what you got to do. Once we're ready, we'll assert on this again. So then we can assert that we have no transactions found because there are no transactions left, because early in the test, I only created one. If you're wondering how I figured that out, this is an important tip. If you are writing Dusk tests, you can go to your .env and you can set this Dusk headless disabled to anything. You should do true, probably. But also, then it makes it seem like if you did false, it would not be disabled anymore, but that's not true. You could put anything here. You could put hey, there, and now it'll be disabled. So anyway, you can set this value to anything in your .env. Then when you run your test, you'll actually see the browser. The browser will open and you'll be able to see it flying through the browser at light speed and doing all your user actions. So this is how I figured out about the tests, because I was watching it get to this point and then it would just pause for 5 seconds. And I was like, what is going on? And it finally dawned on me. I was like, the word delete is still up in that toast. So if you get stuck on anything, not just something like this, any part of Dusk where you're like, I don't get what's going on. Maybe you're trying to press a button and it's telling you, well, this element isn't clickable. Maybe you have a modal open when you weren't expecting it and there's a backdrop that's in the way of pressing that button. Something like that. Don't ask me how I came up with that example off the top of my head. So yes, set this. If you're ever stuck, stop banging your head against the wall and just trying to walk through it in your head. Just watch the browser do it. Throw a pause in there and see where it's getting stuck and what the actual error is. That's really it. That's the major tips I have for you. Other than those things, it's pretty straightforward. If you start messing around with Dusk, it took me a little bit to get the hang of it, but once you kind of get in the flow and you think about, okay, I'm not writing code to do these things. I'm writing code to like act like a user. It clears it up and you'll start to roll pretty quick. So shout out to Dusk. That's really nice. I have these tests in production now, which is great. Before I am able to merge anything, I'll run it in a GitHub action and make sure that I'm not going to break something for my paying users. Thank you, paying users. Hopefully this will improve the quality. One of my next videos, if you're curious, is going to be release notes. I want to add a couple features to buckets, but some of them won't be visible right there on the home screen. So I want a little release note pop up or something, an indicator. I don't know. I haven't decided how I'll do it yet. But feel free to join me in the next episode of Real World Laravel and we'll figure out how to get it done. Until then, like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more, and thanks for watching.